From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Stefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Another group of migrants is rushing to reach the United States to join the first ones already at the border in Tijuana. On Tuesday and Wednesday, two groups of around 350 migrants each arrived to Tijuana at the border with the U.S. The caravan left Honduras 1 month ago. The migrant caravan continues its journey north as it goes through Sinaloa, one of the most dangerous states in Mexico. Our correspondent Pablo Perez has the story.
Since early in the morning, the migrant caravan arrived in the state of Sinaloa from Nayarit. From there, they are organizing their next step in this journey with the help of people from one of the most dangerous states in Mexico.
When you say you are from Culiacán, Sinaloa, right away people say names of drug traffickers. People from Sinaloa are good people, workers. People here are willing to help out brothers and sisters and support them.
Tiredness is evident, especially at this time of day.
We arrived here at 2 in the morning and we are still waiting for transportation. We have not slept at all.
The Escuinapa community is still recovering from the Huila hurricane damages. However, they have help with transport for migrants to reach the northern part of the state.
Since yesterday, there has been more than 1,500 people leaving the city.
Even though they are tired, migrants say it's worth waiting for transportation so they can have a more comfortable journey towards their next destination.
Many people don't understand they have to wait. They are messing around and sometimes we lose help because of them.
Finally, the migrants can board a transportation that will take them to the next state. This migrant caravan is already breaking records after traveling for 690 kilometers in 1 day towards the border with the United States.
Moving on, letters demanding a vote of no confidence are reportedly piling up against British Prime Minister Theresa May. Some of her own MPs are calling for her removal over the Brexit deal. The move comes after 4 members of May's government resigned early Thursday. The backlash also comes just after Cabinet had agreed to support the draft version of the agreement. But with every minister who quits, the chances of May getting the deal through Parliament get slimmer. 48 Conservative MPs need to back the no-confidence motion to trigger a vote.
Morning, everybody.
Following the news, May addressed the House of Commons to defend her Brexit deal.
Speaker, what we agreed yesterday was not the final deal. It is a draft treaty. It's not. It is a draft treaty that means that we will leave the EU in a smooth and orderly way on the 29th of March 2019, and which sets the framework for a future relationship that delivers in our national interest. It takes back control of our borders, laws and money. It protects jobs, security and the integrity of the United Kingdom, and it delivers in ways that many said could simply not be done.
And in an immediate response, opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn has called on May to withdraw the Brexit deal, which he describes as half-baked.
The government, Mr. Speaker, is in chaos. Their deal risks leaving the country in an indefinite halfway house without a real say. The government simply cannot put to Parliament this half-baked deal that both the Brexit Secretary and his predecessor have rejected.
Also weighing in on the Brexit Secretary's resignation is opposition Labour Party spokesman. He's sending a clear message to Prime Minister May.
Obviously, this is the second Brexit Secretary who's now resigned, so I can't overstate the seriousness of the situation the Prime Minister now finds herself in. I don't think that she should now simply carry on saying nothing has changed. She's got to reflect on this. She hasn't got the backing, it seems, of her party. She hasn't got the backing of her cabinet, and she needs to do what we've been saying she should have done all along, which is to reach to the majority in Parliament. Parliamentarians need to now take ownership of this.
Meanwhile, members of May's own party have also criticized the deal. During the parliamentary session, Conservative Party members even suggested that the Prime Minister withdraw the deal.
The DUP will vote against it, our key ally in this place. will vote against it. Over 80 Tory backbenchers, well, it's 84 now and it's going up by the hour, will vote against it. It is therefore mathematically impossible to get this deal through the House of Commons.
And the rapidly rising risk of a no-deal Brexit has triggered concern among investors as the pound fell sharply after government ministers resigned. The British currency plummeted 1.8% against the dollar and more than 1% against the euro. The International Monetary Fund warned in a report published on Wednesday that a disorderly exit from the European Union would lead to severe market consequences. And now joining us live from London is Telesur's political analyst Tariq Ali. Thank you, Tariq, for joining us. Clearly, Theresa May is in serious trouble, but what is likely to happen now?
Well, it's now become unpredictable because with the resignation of Dominic Raab, the Brexit minister, anything could happen. The Tories could trigger off a no confidence motion. And the importance of this is the following, that if the Tories demand a no confidence motion and this somehow is carried with Labour support and the support of the Lib Dems and the SNP and the opposition in Parliament, there will be an immediate general election. There's no two ways around it. In my opinion, it would be much better for Labour to move a no-confidence motion in this government. This would probably unite the Parliamentary Labour Party. It would put the right-wing Conservative skeptics on the spot. Are they going to vote for this no-confidence motion or not? And if it's carried, then an election takes place with Labour very much in charge and with a slight lead. So anything could happen. And I think what it is important to remember that many people who voted to leave the European Union belong to the northern parts of the country, which have been deindustrialized, large numbers of workers working in precarious conditions, unemployed, feeling that the north of England has been completely rejected in the interests of financial capital and the southern base of this capital, which is basically London and its suburbs and some other areas in the south. The east of England remained very skeptical. So what the vote represented, I think it's important to understand, is a protest against neoliberal economics, a cry of rage against the politics that people have been experiencing. And this is something which Labour shouldn't forget, because if they have to fight an election soon, most of their base in the north will expect very clear answers, which the Labour manifesto has at the moment.
Now, Tariq, how is the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn responding to this crisis in the government?
Jeremy Corbyn's position has been very clear. This is not the position of the entire Labour Party, I would stress that, but Jeremy's own position has been very clear. The people have voted. There was a referendum organized by the government. The people have voted to quit Europe, and he is not in favor of any solution which tries to override that decision that was made by the vote of the people. He is a Democrat. He doesn't discount democracy. He doesn't, like some in his party, say that these people who voted were all racists or were all ignorant people. What do they understand of the arguments? He accepts that vote, and he wants to get the best possible conditions for Britain through negotiations. Now, everyone agrees, virtually everyone, that what May has got from the Europeans, from the European Union, is a deal which even a very strong Remain supporter who resigned from her cabinet the other day, Jo Johnson, described as a choice between vassalage, being a vassal state of Europe, and complete chaos. And the vassal state status is heightened by the fact that according to this agreement, what would happen if it went through, is that Britain, as a state, would be subject to all EU decisions economically, probably also to a certain extent politically and ideologically, and it would have nil influence in trying to change these decisions. So they have no power at all, but they have to accept most of the decisions made by the EU, and this is angering both sides of the Conservative Party. I mean, there's one side which said, let's go back into the EU, it's obvious, but their support within the Conservative Party is limited. So if this, as the Labour Brexit oppositionist leader, Keir Starmer, you just showed him saying this should be left now to Parliament. Well, that's not going to happen. It has to be decided by the government. If they can't do it, the government should go, and the demand should be, let's have a general election to determine what the people want. This can be done quite quickly. It shouldn't take too long to organize, and then the new government can continue the negotiations. If the EU doesn't like it, tough. At the moment, the EU has been determining what takes place and what doesn't take place in the negotiations. So I think a general election probably now would be the best solution, unless somehow Theresa May ignores the opposition inside her own party and the fact that her cabinet is severely split. Many people have resigned. The resignations are continuing even as we speak, and says, okay, let this be a vote of the whole House of Commons. Then the thing will be to see how many of the Parliamentary Labour Party support her or not. That's the what will be of interest, because there's no doubt the Liberals will, and the SNP probably will vote with the Tories. I may be wrong here, but the situation is very fluid. But if the matter is thrown now into the House of Commons and the parliamentary parties to decide, anything could happen.
Tariq, we thank you so much for your time. We had been speaking with Telesur's political analyst Tariq Ali from London. More news now. Students in Colombia are protesting once again to demand a higher budget for public universities and to reject neoliberal government policies. One student was arrested by the police. Indigenous groups and workers' unions are joining the demonstration throughout the country. Workers leveled complaints against President Iván Duque's tax reform that is seeking to put a tax on necessity goods. The Senate in Argentina has approved the 2019 budget in the midst of protests. With 45 votes in favor, 24 against, and 1 abstention, senators passed the budget proposed by President Mauricio Macri after 13 hours of debate. This budget is aimed at maintaining the financial agreement the government signed with the International Monetary Fund, but many believe this budget will only further austerity measures, hurting those most vulnerable. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Sabrina Roth, has more.
Argentina's Senate has approved the 2019 budget with 45 votes in favor, 24 against, and 1 abstention. The $57 billion bailout negotiated from the International Monetary Fund includes austerity measures demanded by the fund. The government is hopeful the budget will pull the country out of its economic slump. As such, the GDP is projected to shrink another 0.5%. In fact, the IMF predicts it will fall even lower. The government first signed a $50 billion bailout agreement with the IMF in June, but the peso continued to weaken, and in September, the Macri administration announced spending cuts and then returned to the negotiation table with the IMF. This upped the bailout amount by just over $7 billion. Meanwhile, Senator Anabel Sagasti has said that she feels the government has only increased the country's debt, and more than it ever has in 4 decades. The law will also facilitate a 13% cut in public spending, a 6% reduction in social services, 23% in education, 8% in public health, and 48% in public housing.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve and protect your green zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur. An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Mapuche community member Camilo Catrillanca has been killed by police forces during a raid in the south of Chile. Catrillanca was shot in the head twice by special forces deployed to the area. Social organizations and several lawmakers are blaming the state for the murder and are demanding an investigation. Meanwhile, hundreds of people protested in Chile's capital, Santiago, to condemn violence against the Mapuche people. And earlier, our correspondent spoke to Jaime Wenchuyang, a member of the Temucuiqui community. Let's listen in.
Camilo was killed by members of the Jungle Command around 4:35 in the afternoon. He was building his house, and when the police saw members of the Mapuche community, they started shooting, and one of the shots hit Camilo.
And where is Camilo's body now? Do police have it? Do you have any details?
The body is still at the local hospital. His family is there, and many brothers are going to support his wife, his father, mother, and sister.
Hundreds of indigenous people have arrived to Ecuador's capital, Quito, to urge the National Assembly to protect their water resources. They have marched for 11 days from the Amazonian city of Napo to deliver a bill that will protect the region by banning mining activities. Indigenous people are also calling for bilingual education, the end of the criminalization of their leaders, and an agrarian reform. Bolivian President Evo Morales has praised the work of the army in the defense of their people and their sovereignty. During the 208th anniversary of the Army, Morales spoke about the importance of the Army's commitment to the country. He says it has become an essential tool in the fight against smuggling.
Nowadays, the armed forces have an important honor: the effective fight against smuggling. This is a problem that we face. Bolivia is the first economy growing in South America and second in the whole continent. That raises the price of all Bolivians. And we are convinced that working with the people and institutions, together we can improve the economic and social field of our dear Bolivia.
The 3-month national debate around the new constitutional reform in Cuba has come to an end. People have been discussing the proposed text, a reform of the current constitution that dates back to 1976. These changes include a reform in the state structure, the recognition of private property, and an open path for same-sex marriage. Now, the text will go to Parliament and then submitted for referendum to be voted in February. Our correspondent in Cuba, Fabiola Lopez, tells us more about the end of the debate.
This is an unprecedented moment in the constitutional history of Cuba and the world. In this popular debate, everyone can participate. Cubans living outside the country even can take part in the debate of the new constitution, and they can do so through a website. Participation has been greater than expected. 7 million Cubans have participated already in the debate, shown by data from 2 weeks ago. More than 1 million suggestions and more than 6,000 proposals were registered. Reforms were submitted to almost all of the 755 articles in the Constitution, but 8.
We thank Fabiola for that report. President David Granger has cancer. He was in Cuba for medical tests, and that is where his diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was confirmed. President Granger will begin chemotherapy treatment on Thursday. He will also have to remain indefinitely in Cuba because of his treatment. However, it has been reported that his prognosis is good and that he is expected to make a full recovery. Cuba has announced it will end its collaboration with the More Doctors program in Brazil. More details in this report.
The Cuban Health Department has announced their doctors will leave the More Doctors program in Brazil. The decision came just after President-elect Jair Bolsonaro referred to the Cuban specialists in a threatening and dismissive way. Bolsonaro also reaffirmed his willingness to change the terms and conditions of the agreement with the organization.
They say that this was a program that barely benefited the Cuban government. But actually, this is a program that offered medical care to 60 million Brazilians that didn't have access to basic medical care before. So, Cuba and other countries ending their contribution to the program means ending with it.
The program was created in 2013 under former President Dilma Rousseff. It promoted the assistance efforts of Brazilian and foreigner doctors in poor and isolated areas of the country.
We have an extraordinary health public system, but the support of Cuban doctors who went to small towns was very important to our country. It was a huge opportunity because it brought a different kind of medicine that was centered on prevention and the human being, and that was important for Brazil. It's an irony that Bolsonaro's government program is aiming at privatizing our health system. He was the victim of an attack in a small city in Minas Gerais, and he was saved by our health system. He was operating in a hospital that receives public resources to do surgical operations like that. He was saved by the system he wants to privatize.
People around Brazil are grateful for the respect, professionalism, and attention of the Cuban doctors that contributed to their country.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Gabon's High Court has ruled that the vice president will chair the cabinet in the absence of President Ali Bongo, who suffered a stroke last month. Prior to the ruling, only the president had been authorized to chair the cabinet, and his temporary unavailability was not addressed by the Constitution. The president has been hospitalized in serious condition for the past 3 weeks. 857 people have died in the Democratic Republic of Congo on the latest cholera outbreak to hit the country. According to the World Health Organization, more than 25,000 cases have been reported so far. The outbreak affected 21 out of the 26 provinces in the country. Last year, the country recorded 55,000 cases, resulting in more than 1,000 fatalities. The president of Guinea-Bissau, José Mario Vaz, is holding consultations with various political forces on the delay of parliamentary elections. These elections were scheduled for November 18th, but problems with the electoral census will probably force a delay. The polls were intended to resolve the political crisis that the country is facing since the dismissal of Prime Minister Domingo Simões Pereira in August of 2015.
President José Mario Vaz wants to listen to all political parties and their opinions to allow him to better reflect the current situation in Guinea-Bissau.
Tunisia's new government has been sworn in. President Beji Caid Essebsi has presided over the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Youssef Chahed at the presidential palace in Carthage. Boosting the country's stagnant economy will be one of the main issues for the cabinet. And now let's have a look at some other headlines from around the world.
Leaders of the European Union and South Africa have held a summit in Belgium to review their bilateral ties and cooperation agreements. The 7th meeting marks 100 years after Nelson Mandela was born. The goal of this forum is to increase trade investment as well as multilateralism and rules-based order. Leaders from around the world are meeting in Singapore during the last day of the Association of Southeastern Asian Nations meeting. 10 ASEAN countries plus China, the US and Japan came together in a summit where that focuses on community building and strengthening ties. During the 3-day summit, different leaders have also discussed bilateral issues.
We also exchanged views on future directions for the East Asian Summit in response to the complex challenges we face today so as to maintain regional peace, stability and prosperity.
More protests have taken place against the acquittal of a Christian woman accused of blasphemy in Pakistan. A week after Asia Bibi was released after 8 years in prison, people have rattled violent protests calling for her and the country's top judge's murder. Blasphemy is an inflammatory issue in Muslim-majority Pakistan.
Giant animal-shaped lanterns have lighted up in France. Tyrannosaurus, rhinoceros, polar and brown bear, flamingos and pandas shined in the winter night of the Jardin des Plantes in Paris. The artistic installation was set to provide a holiday cheer while it raises awareness of biodiversity. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And for our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on StarSat channel 461 in South Africa and channel 539 in Nigeria. Also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.